Thank you for joining us. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm your host, Daniel Davis. Today we're going to be talking about a wonderful adventure with a guest that we've had previously on our program, sharing with us her experience with her and her husband, Bill, in walking across the Gobi Desert. This is another amazing adventure in which they go up to the Alaskan tundra and they spend an entire year with wild wolves, observing from as close as 100 feet away from the entire time just what the wolf does. What does it do all day? How does it interact? Its social structures. And not to mention an immutable number of animals that they discovered as well, such as polar bear, such as sheep, Dall sheep, and we're also talking about things like caribou and beaver. There's just a whole array of adventure, and I'd like to welcome our guest to the Beyond 50 radio program today, the author of Three Among the Wolves, Helen Thayer. And Helen, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
It's my pleasure.
You bet. Now, wolves, what compelled you to decide that you wanted to spend time with wolves?
Well, my husband and I wanted to study wolves for many years. We were fascinated by them, and we'd seen them out on the polar ice cap in close proximity to polar bears. And so we thought one day we would like to study them, but in the true wild, not a captive pack, and not in a national park or anything like that. But our big problem is humans just simply can't turn up at a wolf den and expect the wolves to stay around for long. So we really didn't have an answer to it until we decided that perhaps the dog, Charlie, my polar bear dog, that I took to the magnetic North Pole with me to help protect me from polar bears, his grandfather was a wolf, an Arctic wolf, and we thought possibly there might be some link to where he might be able to interact with a wolf pack, and so and basically be the link, provide the link between his human pack and the wild wolf pack. And to make a long story short, it did work. It was an experiment, of course. We had no idea if this would work, but we planned it very carefully, and then proceeded to just find out if this would work, and it did work.
Now, you found yourself, you're quite a ways out there. This isn't something that's on the fringe of the city within 20 or 30 miles, but I mean, you're out there. And so as you talk about planning, one of the key elements is planning to have enough, of course, clothing and the right type of food, and then, of course, fuel, and then where you're going to be able to stay, all without being too much of a loud sign saying, "Hi, here we are, humans, we're watching you." That must have been quite a task to plan for something like that.
Yes, in fact, we had to go out the previous summer and look for a wolf den. We wanted to be in a very remote place that would be basically inaccessible to the average hunter. And so we went into that area, into an area that we thought might provide those requirements, but then to find the wolf den and also to find a den that we could live close to and to be able to observe these animals. So it took us about a year, well, an entire summer to find the suitable den and then to observe them from a distance just to see what that pack was about. And then we returned home and for that winter to prepare, and then returned to the wolf den the next spring.
Now, wolves are just remarkable animals, especially when it comes to their family standpoint and their social structure. Tell us about the things that you observed and experienced with this pack.
Well, the most compelling thing that we observed was their compassion for each other and the close family ties that they have. Very, very close-knit family, a lot of compassion. The entire family raised the pups, and it was just really, it was a wonderful thing just to be able to observe something that we humans in America have just basically lost. Strong family ties and just acting as a family unit.
As you said, there are many hands when it comes to a wolf pack that are involved in raising the pups, and I was reminded of a particular story you were talking about. I believe I know one of the teenage wolves was Klondike, and it eludes me who the other one was. And they were at play by a stream, and pretty soon it broke out into an all-out fight. And then Denali, which is one of the wolf, I guess, the alphas, so to speak, came in and kind of broke it up and said, let's knock this off. So they don't tolerate that kind of stuff.
No, the pups are, and the pups of the year, as they grow, they're very disciplined, and if they break the rules, the punishment can be quite severe.
Mm-hmm.
They're nipped and flipped on their backs and nipped some more, and they just there's a lot of yelping and begging for forgiveness and so forth. But they're severely punished, and they learn at a very young age, don't break the rules and you'll be okay.
Yeah, it's a good thing wolves don't have psychologists telling them how to raise children.
Yes.
Sounds like they're very successful at it. Now let's talk about the hierarchical structure of wolves and how that was set up. It was because, as you read this book, there's not only a sense of adventure, but you really connect with the wolf. And a wolf, over the centuries, has just gained a really unnecessarily bad reputation in many ways. And as you read the book, Three Among Wolves, and I love wolves. I've watched plenty of wolf documentaries and the like, and I just realized this is really sometimes a very misunderstood animal.
Oh, very much so. There's a lot of traditional thought among certain people in certain areas of the country where they firmly believe, and it's not right at all, but it's incorrect totally all the way through. But they believe that wolves will attack humans. When they started to reintroduce wolves into Yellowstone Park, there were Montana ranchers and ranchers around the area of the Yellowstone National Park who simply declared, even to the press, that they would have to keep their children locked in the house because the wolves would attack and kill them. Well, which of course that just isn't true at all. And so there's that traditional thought among certain groups, but then there are other groups who just don't really know much about the wolf and they don't really care. And then there seems to be a tremendous misconception as to what role does the wolf play in the natural environment, and wolves play an enormous part in they're predators, and they control the size of herds, and therefore keeping herds of elk and caribou, especially these sorts of animals, keeping them at a manageable level so that they don't eat themselves out of house and home, so to speak, and they take out they usually hunt only the old and the weak. They will take some young, of course, but this is one way that the genetic structure of a caribou herd, for instance, is kept strong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, as far as the wolf hierarchy, how is it decided, who the alpha male and who the alpha female is, and then it kind of goes down the chain?
Well, usually the alpha female and alpha male, if you can imagine that a wolf pack, a wolf family is it's a ladder, and on the top rung of the ladder is the alpha female and male, and they are usually animals that are domineering, they're leaders, they're strong and healthy. And then below them are the beta animals, second in command, and then on down, all the way down to the omega animal at the bottom rung of that ladder. And of course, the pups are in there as well, and the pups of the yearlings, who now are growing quite large and quite strong. They're in that area as well, and they take that. This dictates as to where they take their turn in eating and the hunting hierarchy, and the whole structure of the pack is based on that social ladder. Where do they stand on that ladder?
Mm-hmm. Now, Helen, it's interesting because as you're out there and you're experiencing this wolf pack, you begin to notice other structures, naturally speaking, I guess cooperations, if you will, among other animals, and one of them that you talk about is quite interesting is the raven.
Mm-hmm. Yes, there's a strong bond between. We discovered this surprised us because we knew there was a bond, but we didn't know how strong it was before we lived with these wolves. A strong bond between the wolf and the raven helps each find food. For instance, we actually saw ravens come back to the den and fly around and annoy the wolves until finally the wolves follow them. And sometimes the ravens had found carrion out there. And, of course, the raven can't break through the tough skin, so they rely on the wolves to do that. But they basically lead the wolves to that carrion. They break open the carcass, take their fill, and then, of course, the ravens have plenty to eat. They can gain access to it. Sometimes we did also see ravens circling animals and basically showing wolves where animals of prey were also.
Mm-hmm. Now, you also gave an experience, or you were sharing experiences of, I guess, humans and their interaction as well with ravens and the traditions behind that.
Well, we were crossing a river at one point, following a hunt, and the ice, it was covered with ice, but it was very thin in one place, and we went through, and we had a very difficult, it was rather dangerous, and we had a difficult time getting out of that situation, getting back onto the banks of the river. And the ravens had been with the wolf pack that we were following, and they saw our predicament. And the most amazing things happened when we finally got ourselves out onto that bank. Here these 8 ravens were standing around, obviously very concerned about us, and circling us and making noises, and almost as though they were encouraging us. And it was amazing. And then once we were safe and up on the bank and had sort of reestablished ourselves, then they flew off to join the wolf pack.
Kind of like your own little cheerleading section, huh?
Yes.
Come on, you can do it.
Yes, it just felt like that. It was an amazing experience to think that this bird cares about us.
Mm-hmm.
And because by this time, we had lived for quite some time. We were several months now living with the wolves at their den and with these ravens, so they knew us.
That's incredible. I know that I was also reading in your book, Three Among Wolves, about the ravens, how I guess it was an elder was talking about how his brother had actually injured himself, and so the ravens went to kind of say, hey, come here a minute, you've got a problem over here, and they actually brought the person to the injured person and was able to get some help there. And I thought, that's the interesting thing about the cooperation of nature when man is actually in the world and not of it. That just amazing mysteries and just times of magic seem to happen. And I know that as I was reading through your book, you experienced quite a lot more than you probably had expected, didn't you?
Oh, yes. We learned more than we ever expected. We saw more than we expected, and we became more than we ever expected. We came away with a tremendously improved understanding of nature as it should be. Mm-hmm. And the environment that nature lives in, and we became part of that instead of the usual human way where we go into an environment and we're not really we're not established into it solidly. That we really became part of the environment. And I think this is why the ravens reacted to us the way they did, and the wolves reacted the way they did.
Mm-hmm. Because they could see from you that you were just being cooperative, that you were just part of everything there and not separate from it, and that to me would seem like a nice pay of respect from nature to you folks.
Yes, we really felt really honored to be treated with these animals as they treated us. They treated us with respect, and also they showed us that they weren't afraid of us. And so that was big for a human to be able to go near a wolf pack and come away with that feeling.
I know there was one fascinating documentary that I've seen by National Geographic, and it was about the white wolf, which is a very rarely photographed or filmed wolf. And these two gentlemen went out, and just like you, sort of inch by inch over a course of time, the white wolf pack, the Arctic wolf, was allowing them in. What was fascinating about what you're talking about, what was shown on this film, is these are wolves that are way out there in the tundra. They're just it's remote. And so because these two guys took the time that they did to basically be slowly accepted by the pack, that by the end of the film, they were actually allowed into the den to film the pups, while the alpha female sat outside and was quite fine with that. And I thought, this is one of those amazing things where nature reaches across and tries to connect, and sometimes we just don't seem to want to have it, and I wonder, what is our folly, our problem?
Well, I think our big problem is that we want to go out and control everything.
Mm-hmm.
We want to control the environment. We'll cut down the trees and we'll turn it into agriculture land and so forth without any regard to the animals that were there first. Mm-hmm. And then when we interact with animals, well, they have to move out of their way to make room for us. Mm-hmm. We can't accept the fact that they were here first, and we need to cohabitate with them, rather than control them. And this creates problems. It's the same thing as when a housing development comes about and it's built. People are living in the houses, and then a cougar passes by. And in a case of a black bear that just happened just the last few days, a black bear roamed through the suburbs of part of Seattle here, and people. One woman said she screamed when she saw the bear, and then somebody else ran for their lives and gathered up their children to get them away from the bear. And the bear was just passing through, just trying to get back to the mountains where he'd apparently come down. A young bear was just trying to get back. Well, people, if they'd stopped and thought about this as being an animal, it really didn't want to be there at all, and wasn't going to attack them. But this is what we do. We react in this way to animals, wild animals.
Now, you also, you start off with a particular story where you were all following the wolves on a hunt. All of a sudden, they seemed to have stopped, and they were listening, but you couldn't quite hear what was going on. Then they turned and dashed, and then you realized that in a short period of time that there was a plane actually coming toward them, and they began to learn, and this was something that I'm sure they conditioned over a learned experience, but they were actually being hunted. And then you go in and you begin to talk about the wolf populations around the world, and it's very alarming to think that we think of these animals the way we do, that we're just out to kill them, and their numbers are getting greatly reduced. Let's talk about that for a minute.
Well, their numbers are being reduced. In fact, in some places they've been wiped out altogether. Mm-hmm. There's even Alaska, which is a perfect place for wolves to live because there are very few cattle herds there and domestic animals, and it's just mostly wild territory and wild herds of caribou, moose, and so forth. And so wolves, it's a place that they belong because these herds of animals need predators to keep their numbers low enough that there's enough food for everyone, and to weed out the weak and the sick. And that's important. That's why predators are here on this earth, that they have a job. But there's a movement in Alaska to eliminate wolves in many areas, drastically eliminate them, whole packs at a time. And of course, this is so that the caribou and moose herds will increase. Well, my husband and I have actually trekked through areas where there have been so many moose in the area, they've eaten themselves out of house and home, and they're diseased and they're starved in the process of starving. All because there are no predators anymore. They've been killed off. Mm-hmm. And it upsets the balance of nature. Once man goes in and tries to control the balance of nature in his favor, in his perceived favor, then things go terribly wrong.
Mm-hmm. Helen, I have to ask you, is there anything being done about this? Because I know that when you were talking about the Alaskan area there, that they were protected for a while, but then the hunters, of course, started grumbling, and all of a sudden it was kind of lifted. And it's like, what is being done, anything encouraging to keep that from happening?
Well, it's very difficult because in Alaska, the governor recently lifted the ban on aerial hunting, and there's large numbers of wolves being hunted, especially in the wintertime. They're being hunted from the air. And it occurs during the winter when the snow is quite deep, and the wolves run through this deep snow, and of course they're quickly exhausted and can't go very fast anyway, and so they run to exhaustion and then shot. And then people are out with snowmobiles, they run the wolves to exhaustion and shoot them. So it's not, to start with, it's not sportsmanlike at all, if they call it sport, and it's just wholesale slaughter. And a big problem, too, is when you take out certain members of a wolf pack, that will destroy the family structure. And so people actually voted this down in Alaska twice, but then the government up in Alaska decided to bring it back of their own accord. And recently, the ban that wolves were taken off the endangered list, I believe it was in Montana and perhaps Idaho and Wyoming. And so wolves, they can go out and shoot them.
Now, I know that in one of your chapters it was the hunt, and people, when they have an opportunity, whether it's through film or as you and your husband Bill did, wanted to go on a hunt. Now, what was important about that experience? Because one thing, just to let the listeners know, you didn't just set, around your camp, say a few hundred feet from a wolf den, and then that was the extent of it. But you were very active in following them pretty much everywhere that you could.
Yes, that was, of course, in order to learn all we could about wolves, we had to observe hunts. We had to be able to go where they went, and then return to the den, and just as they would return to the den. And but of course, trying to follow wolves on a hunt, it's impossible to keep up with them. They can run for much faster and for much longer time. So we had to be very clever. Took us a while to figure it out, but we eventually figured out the routes that they would normally take to hunt. And then there was a couple of routes that we could use by taking shortcuts across some ridges, so that we could get ahead of them and then wait for them to come by and then catch up again. We had to do it that way, but we were successful in seeing them hunt, and it was it's an amazing experience.
Yeah, I remember even, again, like I said, I really enjoy wolf documentaries, and there are some really great ones out there where you actually feel like you're part of what's happening, and they seem to, during their hunt, look like they're at play. It's fun watching them just doing their thing, but they really calculatedly know what it is that they're looking for. Oh
yes, they hunt as a team, and it's quite common for one to go ahead, and or several perhaps to go ahead, and they're in hiding, and others will bring up the rear and sort of herd the prey past the animals that are waiting, and then as the prey goes past the waiting animals, they'll leap out from their cover, and then they attack and bring the animal down, and then by that time the ones in the rear have caught up. And so it's very, very clever.
And wolves are tremendously resourceful, especially when food tends to become scarce.
Yes, they are. They perhaps they're in good caribou territory, and they might be used to catching caribou, but then if they become scarce in that area, they can go to smaller animals. They're smart. They're survivors.
Now, in this experience, do you and Bill plan to go back again?
We've been back to observe that wolf den several times. We didn't go back to live alongside the den again because we didn't want them to get used to us being there year after year,
right?
And becoming too habituated to humans. During the time we were there, they accepted us and allowed us to be very close to them and lay down to sleep, just not quite at our feet, but almost. But we didn't want this to go on year after year. We felt that would not be right for the wolves. So we returned, and there's a high ridge that we could look down on at the den and watch from a distance, and we'd choose times when the wind was blowing away from the den toward us, so that our scent would not be carried toward the wolves. And so we were able to observe them from a secret, you might say. We just carefully concealed a distance away, but up higher so we could look down at the den. And we've seen that family continue to use that den, and of course, the family structure changes over the years.
I'll tell you, it's a fascinating adventure that you and your husband Bill, and of course your third party, Charlie, there, really must have thoroughly enjoyed. Now, besides the moment when you were able to mix in some lichen into your rice and surprise Bill, what was one of his favorite experiences?
I think Bill's favorite experience was just simply being with the wolves, watching Charlie, our dog, interact with the wolves. Bill is very much into the environment, and he just enjoyed just being there. In fact, both of us, we just were so. It was such a wonderful experience. If we could have figured out how to do it, we would have stayed there for the rest of our lives. That's how wonderful it was.
I'll bet. Yeah, it sounds so. Well, it's certainly it's an amazing adventure. It's a book that, as you read it, can make you angry at times, especially for what humans tend to do to these animals that really aren't bothering anybody and actually help the ecosystem to thrive. And then at many times it brings you to a point you wished you were out there experiencing some of the marvelous things, such as even just watching wolves at play, for instance. And of course, you were talking in your book about a lynx when you came across a lynx, which hunts the hare, and how that can be kind of a vicious cat, but is almost like a ghost for the rest of the time. Just all the different animals and the experience that you had in nature, basically wrapping its arms around you and saying, "Thank you for coming in. Now, why don't you share this with the rest of the world so they can have the same humility and respect?"
Yeah, yes, sharing our story with the rest of the world was most important to us, because we realized the importance of wolves in the environment, but also we learned just exactly what type of animal they are. Mm-hmm. And we felt that as humans, we have so much to learn from them. And we couldn't let those lessons just simply go away and be our experience only. So I quickly set to work to write the book, and I really enjoyed writing that book because it allowed me to relive those experiences. And so through the book, I hope people gain a greater understanding of wolves and learn to respect them as we do, but learn that they are a very important part of this environment, and to eliminate the wolf altogether is not going to help. It's not going to be good for a healthy environment.
Mm-hmm. Now, there is up toward Seattle on the way up there, and this is for our listeners, maybe even worldwide, who happen to visit the Northwest, is a wolf rescue place known as Wolf Haven.
Yes, they do a wonderful job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had the opportunity to visit Wolf Haven, I think it was about 2 summers ago, mm-hmm. and I'll never forget the experience, because there was a moment, most of the wolves were pretty much laying around like, oh, here we go, a bunch of tourists again. And I came to this one particular cage, and I just kind of let the group go, and it was sort of like I was telekinetically, if you will, trying to signal to one of the wolves, hey, get up, let's talk to each other. And it was like all at once, one of them kind of lifted its head, nose in the air, kind of turned back and eyed toward me and decided, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and get up and come over here. And it did. And it passed by me a couple of times, and then it just sat for a minute. And some of the people in the group were looking back like, what in the heck's going on there? But I was just trying to pay the animals the wonderful respect that they deserve. And I hope that one day I get to enjoy what you and your husband Bill and Charlie got to experience, because it's important that people understand what we're doing out there and to not let that happen.
Well, I think that is very important, and I think that the way that you allowed that wolf into your life, or basically the wolf was allowing you into its life. Mm-hmm. But I think that the approach of I'm not here to harm you, I'm here to learn. I have nothing to teach you, you have everything to teach me, mm-hmm. and just have that gentle, soft approach. Animals respond to that very, mm-hmm. very positively. Mm-hmm.
Well, the book is Three Among the Wolves, and our guest today, Helen Thayer. Could you please go ahead and give a website where people can find out more about a lot of your other wonderful adventures, because you and Bill seem to really be extreme adventurists, but in the right sense of the word.
Yes, we're still hard at it. We have many thousands of more miles to walk in various parts of the world. My website is just www.helenthayer.com. Helen Thayer, one word, .com. And you can find more information there, and also email me if you wish.
Well, very good. Well, Helen Thayer, thank you for taking the time to be on the Beyond 50 radio program today, because I know one of our goals as people approach midlife and they're thinking retirement, you got to wonder to yourself, retire to what? And certainly I don't think that word's even in you and Bill's vocabulary.
No, as we say, we don't have time to retire, and life is what we make it. And I always say that regardless of our age, age is no barrier to our dreams and goals. We can do what we want with whatever age, as long as we have the desire.
Very good. Well, Helen Thayer, thank you for joining us here on the program today. It's been a pleasure again.
It's been my pleasure.
You bet. And we also encourage you folks out there, pick up a copy, Three Among the Wolves, and get yourself caught up in the adventure, because you never know where it's going to take you to where then you can serve nature and the world as well. We also encourage you to visit us at our website at beyond50radio.com and sign up for our free weekly e-newsletter. I'm Daniel Davis. You've been listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. Thank you for tuning in, and remember, live your day past halfway.